We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth. With FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist, Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast for Tuesday, March 17th, 2026. Welcome to it. Today, we're going to be talking all about the bad idea fairy. So we got some examples about a fertilizer crisis that is brewing as a result of our kinetic operations going on in Iran right now. Also, electric vehicles are costing multiple vehicle manufacturers billions of dollars. There's a millionaire tax that is on the horizon in one of America's communist enclaves. Also, government-funded rental assistance. Wild rice has a right to live, but babies don't in Minnesota. And one sheriff is saying no to the madness. So let's get after it. One of the very many joys / curses of parenthood is getting to see little people making very bad decisions. Over the weekend, my little guy was very excited. He had a friend over. He wanted to go and access some water pistols because it was beautiful here in the land of milk and honey, which is Florida. And we store those on top of a refrigerator in our garage. So he climbed up and tried to access it, even though he's only 8, and wound up knocking over a ladder and scratching up my wife's car. It's not a big scratch. We're going to wind up getting it fixed, and I think he's going to have the funds to pay for it himself. There will be some punishment, but it all goes down to the bad idea fairy. Failing to ask yourself, how does this end well for me? I mean, it would have been really easy to come and ask mom or dad to go up and get that water pistol for him, but he thought, I'm excited. I want to get it done now, so I'm just going to do it myself. How does it end well for me? Bad idea fairy just strikes us all, and some more than others, particularly if your prefrontal cortex and you're 8 years old isn't fully developed. You make some bad decisions. So tough lesson for the little guy, but I think he'll get beyond it. But I've got some sort of a smorgasbord of stories that I want to get into today that all ask the same question. How does this end well? Was there any sort of assessment or evaluation in the outset? And what is going to be the follow-through? So the first story that I have actually comes from the New York Times, at one point a newspaper, and it's all about that dastardly Judge Boasberg. Headline: Judge quashes Justice Department's subpoenas of Federal Reserve Chairman, crippling its pursuit of Trump's rivals. Well, it's the New York Times because they don't like the president because he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. But I do think this entire thing, which you may or may not have been aware of, is ultimately a question of how does this end well? Now, it all involves the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Go with me right now. I know it's a bunch of turbo nerds that exist. They're the kids that ran for student council in 4th and 5th grade, and they just grew up and continued to run for office. We hate them. They're annoying, but for better or worse, they're kind of in charge of a lot of stuff. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, his name's Jerome Powell. Donald Trump, president of the United States, does not like Jerome Powell, even though I think he appointed him his first time around, because Jerome Powell doesn't want to bring the interest rates down. And because we exist in a time where these quasi-government entities are able to determine things like the interest rates for the entire country, that's a lot of power. And Donald Trump wants the interest rates to come down so people can get loans and they can buy houses and they can thank him for it, go to the ballot box and vote for the Republicans in the midterms. I don't know if any sort of assessment's gone on about, if the interest rates are down, that's going to mean more money in the system, more inflation. Again, how does this end well for me? But on the subject of targeting someone who you don't like, who you at one point appointed, and using the system, using the government apparatuses in weaponized fashion to go after somebody, that doesn't seem like a really good decision, just on precedence alone. So what went down was this criminal investigation at the direction of the White House, maybe not. We don't have access to the communications, but The Department of Justice decided to go after the chairman of the Federal Reserve because there was this remodeling effort going on. They're rebuilding a building, they're doing renovations, and it's coming in over budget. It's like $700 million over budget or something huge. And they're saying that Jerome Powell, when he was asked about it, when he was testifying as the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he lied. So now that this case has progressed and it's gone in front of a communist judge like Judge Boasberg, he's looked at it and said, no, no, you can't do that. Actually, he issued a pretty long response to it. I think it's like 25, 26 pages long. And in this response, Judge Boasberg says, there is abundant evidence that the subpoena's dominant, if not sole purpose, is to harass and pressure Powell either to yield to the president or to resign and make way for a Fed chair who will. Now, this is on top of failures of the Department of Justice to secure indictments for those 6 senators slash congressmen who put out a video telling members of our military to disobey illegal orders, which isn't illegal. Actually, it's First Amendment protected activity, and it's actually encouraged. But they were labeled to be treasonous. And what did hyping them do? What it helped the Democrats stand on firm ground as being principled, right? And also fundraise off of it. We also had the failures to maintain the cases against Jim Comey and Letitia James. There was also the other failure, I think it came out of DC. Yeah, there was the auto pen that we covered down on last week. So the Department of Justice, particularly the United States Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., is just kind of a bleep show at this point. They're bringing bad cases forward, even if there's legitimate targets who might have violated federal law. They're doing a really poor job. And on top of that, they're bringing cases where there really isn't a case to be brought. How does this end well? I mean, serious question. You indict Jerome Powell, perhaps send him to prison, put him in a cage so that you can replace him at the Federal Reserve. That's how it ends well. And now you've set a precedent that if you don't like the chairman of the Federal Reserve, you will just weaponize law enforcement to go after somebody. That's not going to end well for anybody. Bad idea, Ferry. Striking here. And it looks like, for once, the communist judge Boasberg might have come down to the right side of history. Another questionable decision, and I have a little bit of insight into this one, involves the fertilizer market. I know it sounds really nerdy, but it's very important because if you've checked a calendar, it's March, we're in planting season. If you're in the Midwest, you know that now is the time that you're putting down the fertilizer so that you can plant the crops and that we can have food to eat during the harvest season, right? But because of this kinetic operation, definitely not a war. How dare you call me a stewardess? I'm a flight progress coordinator going on in Iran right now. There's a particular shipping lane known as the Strait of Hormuz, which has been shut down. Now, there's a whole bunch of fertilizer that comes to this country from that particular region. My wife works in this industry, and according to her, prices are going bonkers right now because there's now a shortage. There's all this fertilizer, it can't get out. So whatever is on the seas right now is becoming more valuable. So in the area of trading, selling, and buying of the different fertilizers, prices are going really big. How is that going to be countered? Well, we had an announcement. This comes from the Washington Times. It's sort of an announcement with an intention to announce things. But again, let's assess whether or not this is a good idea or a bad one. Headline is White House teases solutions to fertilizer crisis sparked by Iran war. Well, Washington Times called it a war. Interesting. But you should know that about a quarter of U.S. farmers have not yet purchased the fertilizers that they need. And the prices have gone up by 30% in the last couple of weeks. Now, the agriculture secretary, her name is Brooke Rollins. She said that a bailout and other fixes are under consideration. Bailouts. I have the wrong piece up there. I'm sorry, guys. Here it is. Again, headline, White House teases solutions to fertilizer crisis sparked by Iran war. And you can see a picture of Brooke Rollins right there. Here's the problem. Bailouts. Do you remember the first time that you heard the term bailout? Did that give you a warm and fuzzy? to figure out that the financial institutions, which had been propping up these ridiculous home loans in 2008, and it had been going on for a number of years, they were too big to fail. So you, the taxpayer, had to bail them out. It was really the death throes of the George W. Bush administration. Was that a good precedent at the time? No. And here's why. And then here's why continuing it is a bad idea. It's a bad idea fairy striking yet again. A bailout is the definition of fascism. It is the government partnering with private industry, essentially picking winners and losers. Remember that term was floating around? That was a really bad one. And they're taking money and redistributing it from each according to his ability to each according to his need. And then comes this gross symbiotic relationship between private industry and government. And when you can pick winners and losers, they often do a quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's really gross and corrupt. But this sort of thing has gone on in the agriculture industry for a pretty long time, even within the current presidential administration. So Donald Trump has a lot of support from the heartland. The farmers love Donald Trump. There's a kind of a quid pro quo that's attached to that because economically, it's not the best time to be a farmer. And that is even going before this definitely not a war, it's only a kinetic operation in Iran. So I've got an adjoining piece to it to say, this bad idea fairy just keeps coming back over and over again. And this comes from the USDA, which is a sub-agency of the Department of Agriculture, which Brooke Rollins oversees. And it talks about more bailouts. The headline here, Trump administration announces $12 billion farmer bridge payment, because bailout sounds bad. And it's for American farmers impacted by unfair market disruptions. Well, I mean, it pulls on the heartstrings. Unfair. We want justice, right? But really, what was it? So in this case, the United States Department of Agriculture will make a $12 billion available for one-time bridge payments. And this was late last year, so only a few months ago. We've already done a bailout. It's only a couple months old. $12 billion to American farmers. Why? According to the USDA, it's because there are still increased production costs impacting farmers following 4 years of Biden administration. So blame Biden, reward the farmers for having supported you and voting for you with $12 billion. That's not the only amount of money that was given out there, because there was further, and even in this piece itself from the USDA, there was something called ECAP, which stands for Emergency Commodity Assistance Program, which gave $9 billion out to help farmers recover from economic hardships of 2024 because of the Biden administration. So the $12 billion headline is for 4 years. The $9 billion given out under ECAP is just for 1 year of those 4 years, just a little bit of redundancy. It's the Department of Redundancy department. You have the Marketing Assistance and Special Crops, MASC, because our government is way too big and loves the acronyms because they get boring and people don't pay attention. And they gave out a little under $2 billion for market disruptions stemming from the Biden administration. More money, blame your predecessor, and reward your friends. There's the SDRP, Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, all of these coming from the Department of Agriculture, all of them within the Trump administration part due over the last 14 months. $9 billion going to be distributed. That's in addition to another $6 billion that already was distributed because of severe weather, bad weather, that is just part of being a farmer. But this again is taking money from the American taxpayer via theft, I mean taxation, or printing it out of thin air, causing inflation, or borrowing it on the backs of children and grandchildren, people who haven't even been born yet, so that we can send it to the farmers so that they can continue to politically support the presidential administration. There's also some block grants, again, taking more money, handing it out. And the USDA has provided nearly $1 billion in what they call Section 32 purchases. That's the government buying food from farmers, not because the government has its own stream of income, because they have the ability through the force of a gun to steal from you, I mean tax you. So taxing you, printing money, borrowing, to spend money and give it to farmers so they can buy their crops and help the farmers, and then turn around and hand that crops out for charity. So it's compulsory charity from the government. It sounds good. I mean, everybody likes charity. Everybody likes to do good things to help their fellow man, but that's not the role of government. Bad ideas. How does this end well? Well, how does it end in general? It means that there's more money out there floating in the system, which causes inflation. It means that you have a gross relationship between government and the private sector, which is ripe for abuse and corruption and weaponization. And this only affects something that, doesn't really impact most of us, the food supply. It impacts everybody. But again, bad ideas are rampant. Nobody is asking, how does this end well? Now, one sort of example, because these are all sort of cautionary, we have some history on our side, there's some precedents we can point to and say, hey, you're going down a problematic path. Where are the results, though, Steve? I mean, you're making the case that these are all the byproduct of the bad idea theory, floating around and casting spells and causing the dumpster fire that you see on the thumbnail today on rumble.com/AmradPod or YouTube at AmradPod or even Spotify at AmradPod. Reminder, guys, this is your reminder. Do all those things to follow the program, share it, like it, thumbs up, all those things really helpful, and particularly over at Spotify, trying to grow the channel out there. But where are the results that you can point to, you can say, yep, you pretty clearly made a mistake? Well, one big example is the electric vehicle market. So this piece comes from CNBC, headline, Honda flags first annual loss hit by $15.7 billion electric vehicle charge. Because all of these car manufacturers went all in on the electric vehicles because short-term thinking, we got the Biden administration in there and they're going to phase out the fossil fuels and it's going to be electric only forever. All these gigantic car manufacturers just went all in on electric vehicles. They invested billions of dollars. And then the political winds shifted. Donald Trump Part 2 comes in, and the Trump administration has basically said, we're not going to support through government policy electric vehicles anymore. And now all these car manufacturers are on the hook for the investments that they have, the bad investments that they had, because they weren't really thinking it through. They were thinking, it's an inferior product. People kind of don't really like it, but it's going to be mandated. So we'll just get in on it. And if it's not profitable for us because the demand for it is exceeding even the ability of technology to supply us with the ability to have a mode of transportation that is efficient and is cost effective and reliable, and they're not having to go to a charging station for 9 hours so that they can drive for 2. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. We might take the hit on the chin financially, but the daddy government, they're going to bail us out, right? So it actually would behoove us financially to invest in electric vehicles. Didn't happen. And now political winds have shifted against electric vehicles. Honda's taken this almost $16 billion loss. The total loss that's projected right now for the entire industry is like $67 billion from last year. 67 billion. A billion is 1,000 million. That's how large that is. $67 billion of losses. That's Ford, that's Stellantis, that's General Motors, and now there's Honda. And those are the 4 that were listed off in the CNBC. I have to imagine that other manufacturers are taking similar financial hits. All right, now here's some local or state bad ideas that are floating around. I mean, how could these possibly end poorly? Let's go on out to one of the communist enclaves in this country, ceded territory, and that's the state of Washington, which, according to Politico, has just passed a millionaire's tax that the governor has pledged to sign. So this tax is through the state Senate. Last week on Wednesday, it approved the tax, which will impose a 9.9% tax on earners making over $1 million per year. 10 cents of every dollar, if you earn over $1 million, goes to the state of Washington, not even federal income tax. And they promised that it's going to fund education and prisons, even though I think they let everybody out of prison in Washington state. Universal school lunches, so state-funded food for kids. And they say it might replace or reduce other taxes, but I've never seen a leftist state like Washington or California, or Oregon, Illinois, New York. I've never seen any of those states opt for lower taxes. So I think that's a pledge that we won't see. And they haven't learned the lesson. I mean, didn't Starbucks just relocate out of Seattle? I think T-Mobile did too. I know Starbucks went to Nashville, and their company founder, he moved to Florida, both of those tax-free states. You're just going to drive away the millionaires. Millionaires have FU money theoretically, right? I mean, unless they're really hedged and their entire lives are stuck in your communist enclave, or maybe they just really like having all their money stolen. I mean, taxed by the state government on top of what the federal government takes, and they're down for the fight because they're true believers. Most elite communists who are making millions of dollars are not living that way. I mean, think about the climate pagan communists, all the rich elitists that live on the coasts who claim that it's an existential threat, that the climate change monster, because you drive your SUV that's not an electric vehicle, is causing the temperature on Earth to skyrocket, and it's making the seas rise, and we're all going to die like they did in Day After Tomorrow. And then Barack Obama turns around and buys beachfront property in Hawaii. He doesn't believe that, but it's a useful message for him to gain political power. But in the case of Washington state, they're just going to wind up losing their millionaires. And those aren't people who are punching a 9 to 5 clock for the man. They are the man. They're the man who's employing all the people in your state, all the people that are saying, yeah, let's soak the rich. They're actually going to bite the hand that feeds them in this case. And what are the chances? And that if you don't live in Washington State, Steve, why do I care? What are the chances that there's a request for a bailout from the federal taxpayers? Hey, we made terrible decisions. The bad idea ferry struck us really hard. It's not our fault. We're really, really sorry. Can you shell out some cash here so that the Americans that live here that made awful decisions don't have to feel the ramifications, the consequences? We have to pause the free market to save the free market. No precedent from that ever is going to come back to bite us in the rear, right? Right? That's Washington State. How about we go to Minnesota for the next example? And this actually comes from a Senate Republican caucus within the state of Minnesota. They have no institutional power, but this headline kind of breaks into this new policy that's coming forward. It's a $40 million Democrat rental aid bill as taxpayer-funded bailout amid Minnesota's affordability crisis. What does this mean? It means that the state of Minnesota is going to take taxpayer dollars from people who live in that state and hand it out to people who are owe back rent. They have not made the rental payments at their apartment, at their condo, at their house, wherever. As long as they qualify, the state of Minnesota is going to take from some and redistribute to others so that their back rent will be handled. Now, they're actually going to take this money because it won't be a direct tax. They're going to reallocate. They'll move it from one pocket of the cargo pants to the other pocket of the cargo pants because money is fungible after all. So it ultimately does get stolen, tax from the citizenry. But they're going to claim that this comes from the Tyler Settlement Fund. Now, I didn't know what this was. I had to look it up. And you talk about how we are covering down on the bad idea ferry. This was a Supreme Court case. It happened a few years ago. It was actually decided in 2023. Now, it is apart entirely from we're giving money to people for back rent. It's apart entirely from we're going to tax millionaires 10% because they just earn too darn much. But let's go back in history a little bit. And again, did anybody along the way ask the question, how does this end well for us? So here's a sort of a summary because it is a Supreme Court case that was unanimously decided. Doesn't matter left, right, Republican, Democrat, 9-0. The justices said, no, 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 that dog won't hunt. So I got it from oyez.org, which does a pretty good job. You can get really down into the details or just wave tops about Supreme Court decisions. And involved this case, again, called Tyler versus Hennepin County, Minnesota, which is the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, okay? The background, this woman, her name is Geraldine Tyler. Again, we're the Tyler Settlement Fund that they're going to use in Minnesota to give back rent to their citizens. Geraldine Tyler owned a condo in Minneapolis. She stopped paying property taxes and had a debt of $15,000 to the county. So, to satisfy the debt, the county came in and just seized her condo and sold it off. Did they sell it off for $15,000? No, they sold it for 40. So that would mean that they sold her for 40, she owed 15. Actually, the we don't know about the valuation, but let's just say that they didn't sell it at a discount. We know they did, but let's say they didn't. That means $25,000, 40 minus 15, $25,000 should have been owed to Geraldine Tyler. That's her money. She owed you the funds. Her debt has been cleared. Give her the money. The city of Minneapolis kept the money for themselves, their own proceeds. So she sued because nobody in a position of power at the county level, Hennepin County, thought, how does this end well for us if we pocket $25,000? There's what, 1 million people that live in Minneapolis? You think $25,000 was going to make or break your government coffers? No, it was just vindictive at the hands of a weaponized government. They said, you didn't pay. We're going to screw you over so hard. We're going to take your house and even the excess funds we're going to take just to punish you, to rub it in, to send a message. Now, Geraldine Tyler took it all the way through the courts and she won at the Supreme Court. They said that this violated the Fifth Amendment. It was the takings clause. Like, you can't just take people's property without just compensation. And as a result, now county had to set up this fund to pay homage for what they're done. So that's the background for why this fund got established. Again, bad idea theory is rampant. Just corrupt people along the way. And look, that's Minnesota, Washington State. How about we go on down to blood red Texas, which might be on the verge of electing a Democrat senator, but we'll see. Well, I found a story there again. How does this end well for me? It was a story from Fox News, and it was about this judge. You talk about a corrupt individual. She's a Harris County judge. Her name is Lena Hidalgo, Judge Hidalgo. And part of being a county judge means that you're also like the CEO of the county. So she's managing like $4 billion on top of being a judge. So Judge Hidalgo gets some comped tickets to go to this concert at the Houston Rodeo, I think they call it. Let's see. Yep. It's like the Houston Rodeo. So she gets these benefits of the office, the accoutrements attached to it. I mean, it's not just Cash Patel flying private across the Atlantic Ocean to go and party with a bunch of Olympic hockey players. Look, this happens at local levels all over the place. She takes some guests, they go to the concert, they're partying up, and they try to go into the VIP area. Well, they don't have access to it. And actually, it costs like $400 per person to go into this VIP area. She makes a stink. Do you know who I am? I'm the county judge. You're supposed to just give me everything I want for free. Well, push comes to shove. She eventually gets threatened with arrest and escorted out of the place. Was that enough for her, though? Because she's been offended. It was already a bad idea to try to use your position, but you got away with it. How does it end well for me? Well, I get to go enjoy the concert. I'm willing to risk the ramifications of abusing my office, maybe losing my office, maybe being criminally charged. Who knows? You got away with it. You didn't get the worst consequence. But what does she do? She goes public. She starts to scream. She says, I was treated this way because I'm a woman. I was treated this way because I'm not white. They're secretly racist. I carry my passport around because I'm a person of color. And the current presidential administration, because it's run by a guy who's mean orange and literally Hitler, he's coming after us. In fact, I have her photo right there. You can see she's slightly tan. So, and then last name Hidalgo, I imagine she's of Latina extraction. So she has said that she never accepted anything inappropriately or used her role to personally enrich herself, even though she went to this concert. She questioned her treatment. She said that I don't travel without my passport. And that's where she made her big mistake. That's where the bad idea fairy came and hit her very hard, squarely in the head. And she said, I'm going to make hay while the sun is shining, and I'm going to get maxed out. And unfortunately for Judge Hidalgo, the rodeo has receipts. So the rodeo official said that she was asked several times to return to her suite. It wasn't like she was amongst the huddled masses. She was at a private suite at this concert, and she refused. And then she was escorted out of the venue. They also said that the judge had been there multiple days ahead of time and had received $9,000 worth of access tickets throughout this entire Houston rodeo concert event. They had the receipts, and now she's got some hot water to deal with. We'll see how long she's actually going to be in that position of running that county and being in charge of $4 billion of funds. All right, let's now go back out, I think, to another communist enclave. I think this is Washington State. I might be wrong. No, Minnesota. You know, that whole life thing, particularly Minnesota. The baby has a pinky toe still in utero. You can kill it, essentially, in Minnesota. Abortion on demand. I mean, they're at a point now where they're saying, like, kindergarten, can you kill them? Maybe. I don't know. Right to life is not a thing in the land of 1,000 genders. But you know what might be on the hook for getting a right to life? Rice. Wild rice. This is absurd. This is ridiculous, but you have to go with me on this because there actually is a method to the madness. So, as it stands right now, the state of Minnesota is considering whether or not wild rice has a quote inherent right to life. And I've got a couple video clips. We'll give them each a play, and then we'll actually get to why this is going on.
Senate File 3749 is adding just one sentence to the definition of our state grain. It states, "It is the policy of this state to recognize the inherent right of uncultivated wild rice to exist and thrive in Minnesota."
How about this one where we're going to get a little bit more into it? And boom.
First, this bill applies the legal inherent rights doctrine to a plant that has been in Minnesota since long before there was a Minnesota. That doctrine does not grant any right to wild rice. Rather, it recognizes that the plant's inherent right to live exists because it is alive.
That's crazy, right? I mean, it's just a bunch of Karens screeching at the state assembly, trying to say that rice is alive and babies aren't. That's absurd. That's a bad idea, Steve. No, it's actually brilliant. You got to sometimes tip your hat to the communists. What am I saying? Well, if the proposed bill amends the definition of state grain to include, quote, "It is the policy of the state to recognize the inherent right of wild rice to exist and thrive in Minnesota," that means that environmental policies will have to be protected by their state constitution. It means that it opens up the state to lawsuits that which the Democrats here who are proposing this change will be behind, so that the climate pagans who believe that you driving a non-EV SUV is causing the hole in the ozone layer to make the sea levels rise, and even though they're a landlocked state that isn't touching the coastline, it'll make those crazy people, it'll give them the ability through lawfare to go after the state and introduce and force through their policy agendas, which are basically like the Green New Deal. Hey, the constitution of this state says that we got to protect rice. Ergo, I'm sorry, you can't eat meat anymore. It's bad for the environment. You have to buy an electric vehicle if you want one. You can't drive a gasoline-powered car anymore. You know, I know that it's 30 below here in January in Minnesota, but you've already hit your fuel max. Sorry, we're turning off the heat. All of those things are now on the table for lawfare if they do, in fact, push through what seems like a crazy idea. It's not a bad idea, Ferry. It's actually brilliant. All right, let's go for one more. And this is actually a good one. I saw this because one sheriff in Nevada has actually looked into the mouth of madness and said, no, I'm not down to clown. So there was a couple of pieces here, and this one comes from 8newsnow.com. Headline: Las Vegas police judge class over 35-time arrestees release. This is an issue of public safety. The background for this, is that the Las Vegas Metro Police are challenging the authority of a federal judge whose name is Eric Goodman on this guy that they've got in the pokey right now. His name is Joshua Sanchez Lopez, 36 years old. He's got prior arrests for involuntary manslaughter and drugs and car theft. But the judge, because he's a dyed-in-the-wool communist, wants him released. $25,000 bond, ankle monitor. And the sheriff, who, it's sort of weird, I guess, in this county, the sheriff controls the police department in Las Vegas. They have this weird relationship. But the sheriff there says, no, we're not going to release him because this is a risk to the public safety. So now Judge Goodman is very upset. He wanted the Clark County Sheriff, Kevin McMahill, that's his name, Kevin McMahill. He said he's going to possibly cite him for contempt for defying this order. And the sheriff said, you and what army judge? Who's going to actually affect that arrest? Because even we throw out the nefarious intentions behind this, which I'm sure there are. I'm sure this judge is a communist. But let's just say it's naivete and saying, hey, look, he's in jail on this time. We're not going to weigh any sort of consideration to this prior manslaughter and carjacking stuff. This current arrest right here is not really that big of a deal. So we're going to let him go ollie ox free. And the sheriff said, nope, it's a risk to my public safety, my constituents. This guy has a proven track record. He's been arrested 35 times. In fact, he went on the run from cops with a gun about 5 years ago and was posting online about it saying, quote, got chased again. So we know what this guy's about. And I'm not going to comply with that order. Now, this is the equal branches of government. This is the grinding of the gears. The sheriff comes from the executive branch. The judge represents the judicial branch. I mean, who's going to come out? But ultimately, I think this is an example of a sheriff weighing the pros and cons of the situation and saying, how does this end well for me? Well, if I got to go to jail, I'm going to rely on the people that are here within my institution to continue to do the right thing because I've been held in contempt. This guy is still not getting out. And how does it end well for me? Well, I get reelected in a landslide. It's a good idea, Ferry. So hat tip to that sheriff right there. All right. That's it for the day on the American Radicals podcast, guys. But I will not leave you without a fun palate cleanse. We're talking about some bad ideas and some good ideas. How do we feel about dropping an I love you when you're dating somebody for about a month and a half and they don't return it? Today's palate cleanse.
And then he just didn't ever, and you just never said it again? And you're still dating this person? I mean, do you love him? Like, you still do? You're just like, oh, we'll just like keep it to ourselves? Are all your friends here? How many of your friends are here? 7 friends? Wait. You're telling me that you have 7 friends as an adult. How old are you? 28. You're 28. You somehow have 7 friends. That's unheard of. You're 28. You have 7 friends that all came out with you at the same time. Is it your birthday? No. You have 7 friends that will come hang out with you in a public place with no occasion. And you told a man that you loved him, and he was like, Guys, what are you doing? Y'all are bad friends. This is an insane situation. You know how I know? I'm working right now, and I'm being a better friend to her than you.
All right, guys, we will see you tomorrow at noontime here, rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube at amradpod. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.